Welcome to the Weekend Warriors Fishing Podcast, presented by 13 Fishing Canada. Make your own luck. We are here to talk everything fishing with special guests from across the industry. Now, here is your hosts, Logan Lewis and Jesse Cadron.
Welcome back. Another episode of the Weekend Warriors Fishing Podcast. Coming right up, we are into episode 95, and today we're talking everything CWD, some of the science behind it. I learned a ton of stuff this episode, so you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that. But I am joined by my co-host, Jesse Cadron, up in the Northwest Territories on the island. How's it going?
It's going really good, Logan. It feels good to be back up at Lac La Marte here. Honestly, after the first day, it was like I never left. Just got right back into the groove of things, got the regular gang back here together with a couple other extras, and yeah, it's been really good. But I tell you what, I am super excited to listen to this coming episode here with the CWD chronic wasting. I had so much fun recording this, even though I was like severely sleep deprived. After my road trip from southern BC to Yellowknife when we recorded it, I had a ton of fun, and I think our listeners are going to absolutely love this.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, just a little delay there. But yeah, this one, I'm excited to listen back to this one. It's always when you're recording and everything, it's you're kind of thinking about what to say next. You obviously are listening, but I like listening back to these ones especially because there's a lot of information to take in, and then it kind of allows me to, oh yeah, this is what we're talking about, and then it kind of seems to store it in my brain a little better after that. So yeah, I think you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for the interview here. But before we get into that, I want to cover our sponsors, obviously. Big thank you to 13 Fishing Canada for being the presenting sponsor of the Weekend Warriors Fishing Podcast. We're going to get into it in a little bit here, but I was fishing a tournament this past weekend, and although it didn't go as well in the standings, I did win. Me and my partner each won a prize, and it was the lithium electric filleting knife from Rapala there. So that was pretty sweet. I know those are actually
nice.
Yeah, very nice. They're out of stock quite often. They're hard to keep on the shelves because people seem to love them. So I'm definitely excited to get those in my hands. I think it actually works out perfectly. I'm going up north July long weekend, Canada Day weekend, and that's kind of the only time that I really keep any fish. So I'll be slicing and dicing with that thing there. Looking forward to that. But big thanks to 13 Fishing Canada for being the presenting sponsor. You can use the code Weekend Warriors, that's WKND Warriors, to save yourself 15% off the entire Rapala Canada website. Next up, Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation. Huge thanks to them, as always, for being sponsors of the podcast. Get your memberships. I think I mentioned a couple episodes. I got mine, I got my dad's, got my little cousins. We were all ready to fish the Buffalo Pound walleye challenge there before it got canceled due to winds, but nonetheless still got our memberships and waiting for the next magazine to come out, because that's honestly my favorite part of the whole thing. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Jesse. You know, you're familiar with the Wildlife Federation.
Yeah, totally blanked on here, Logan. You might have to edit this out.
I thought you saw someone out the window.
No, I did. I'd seen them come through, and they like stared at me through the window to the other cabin, and I kind of got distracted. But,
yeah, no, I'm leaving that in for sure. That's funny. I figured there'd be some distractions. Jesse's actually sitting. You are in kind of, I guess it was one of the owner's old quarters, right? That's where you are right now. Okay,
yeah, I'm
so
in
as you can see, lots of the clothes. Yeah,
that we
lots of the clothes behind
merch. Yeah.
Oh, that's looking nice.
Yeah, it turned into a little merch giveaway, or not a giveaway, a stash away, as long as some storage. But then through the window in front of me, I can see the main mess hall, like the dining room, and someone had just came in from a day of fishing and seen me through the window, and had a very puzzled look on their face.
Yeah, why is this guy sitting in here with headphones on?
Yeah. And why is he smiling?
Yeah, why is he smiling? He's by himself in a room with a bunch of clothes.
But anyway,
Well,
Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation. I mean, if you're an angler or a hunter in Saskatchewan, you should be a part of it. You should be getting a membership with your local branch. They do tons of uh, everything revolving around hunting and fishing. Just go be a member, be part of the community. And the magazine's a great bonus. Tons of good information, tons of good stories, fish pictures, hunting stories, all that good stuff.
goes to
If
a
you
good
want to
cause.
if you want to keep public hunting lands and stock trout and just
Access to lakes.
access to lakes and grounds, it's huge. So go be a member, be a good
Outdoors
citizen.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A steward,
for sure.
a steward to the land.
Yeah. Go find your local branch, get your membership, and become a part of an awesome community. But before we hop into the interview portion here, I think it's about an hour, something like that. Maybe just a little bit over that, like we mentioned a couple minutes ago. Tons of great information. I learned a ton and definitely changed my mind about a couple things for the better. But how have things been going at the lodge? You had the client showed up 4 days ago now?
Yeah, they showed up
14th?
on the 14th, so they've had 5 full days of fishing now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, what'd you
one
say it
more
was
day
after
to-
the first 3 days for 40s? Was it?
We were, after the first 3 days, we were at 125 pike over 40 inches between 6 boats.
So six boats,
that's
12 fishermen.
correct. And then Zach did the math as of yesterday. So 4 days, 12 anglers. They averaged 13 and a half fish over 40 per day per boat. So yeah, so I think we're at 163 fish as of yesterday over 40
Nice.
inches, which
Nice.
is insane.
Bump boards must have gotten shorter. Yeah.
We actually did order 2 new bump boards, and they only came at 47 and a half inches for some odd reason.
Oh, what if a 50
don't-
comes by?
I
Benjamin.
know we gotta fabricate something, but no, the fishing's been insane. I've been able to get out a couple times for myself because the angler that I was supposed to guide fell on a concrete floor and shattered his patella. Bob Kretschmer, you remember him? Yeah, so he was supposed to come up, and yeah, obviously couldn't, shattered his knee. So then Colby Hales and myself are splitting the Shearburn group.
Oh,
So
nice.
I guided the first 3 days, and Colby is going to guide the last 3 days. So I've
Yeah.
had
You wanna
today and
talk about
yesterday
tackle.
to. Oh, the guy brings up tons of tackle.
Yeah. Like
It's
if you think you have
and-
lots, if any like OG listeners go back to, I think it was our first episode with Doug Wagner, and he takes you into his basement and I think we have video on Instagram with it from a while back, and like it was tons of stuff in there. Well, I would say Kim brought probably more than that, and all the way from all over the States up to here. That was that 2 years ago when he did that for his birthday?
Yes, but he's done it every year. Like he's been a long time castaway.
I know,
And,
but like, wasn't that like, I guess that was his biggest group of people. So he brought like everything he had, did he not? And rods and
Correct.
reels too. Yeah.
correct, but he did the same thing this year, Logan,
Wow.
but just less people. He
Right.
brought 12 people or 11 people with him, and their limit of personal items, personal gear was 14 and a half pounds. So their clothes, their toothbrush, their shaving kit, all that, and their like couldn't weigh more than 14 and a half pounds. Everything else, fishing gear, tackle, rods,
Right.
reels.
So 14 and a half out of the 50 pounds was actual personal, whatever, clothing, stuff like that. And the rest was, wow. Like I remember he had a bag, it was like 12 Daiwa Alexas in there or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is insane.
Yeah, and Okuma, yeah. I think there's a few 13 fishing spinning reels actually I seen in his group
Mhm.
this year. But yeah, the guy's a tackle nut, and they love fishing, and we catch a ton of pike. and lake trout.
Yeah, they get after it.
They get after
What's
it.
the biggest laker?
Lake trout have been tough. This year,
Scoop's got a big one, didn't he?
he did. His was 40 and a half,
Okay.
and it weighed 30 pounds.
Okay, yeah, it was
fish.
fat.
Yeah, and then I think
Very nice.
Jake got a 41 today. So
Nice.
pretty good.
Bass guy Jake with the big trout.
Yeah, with the big bass hook sets.
Yeah.
And then I think my most memorable moment of the lodge so far also happened with that blind silver pike.
Right. Yeah. If anyone hasn't seen that, go to the Instagram. We shared it on on the podcast and Jesse's page together there, and that was cool. I've had that, not like that. Mine that I caught my last year up there was probably about a third that size. It was harder to catch because it seemed to have a bit more idea what was going on, but yeah, like dark, but not silver black, I guess.
Right. So you're saying a blind pike that you had caught or netted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you think.
Big.
It makes you think how many blind fish are in the lakes back home that we normally fish. That just are they there and we just don't see them, or is there just more blind pike here than at home?
Right. And I guess the other question is too, like, when did it become blind? How long has it been blind? Right. Because how does a fish get as big as the one you caught there being blind?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, pike are scavengers, so I'm sure they can find a fair bit of food just sniffing and using their senses. But the one you had caught, Logan, was it like tight to bottom and just like glued and laying in the weeds, all motionless, or was it up?
No,
and
it was
moving in
just
the water
it was
column?
cruising like a couple inches below the surface.
Like this, like just barely below.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For us to see it, and then I had to maneuver back troll a bit to get to it and whatnot. Actually, what we ended up doing. It wasn't totally blind. It could kind of see because one of my clients tossed out a fly, and we brought it back, and he stripped in to, like, I placed the net down on the water, and then he stripped in to the net, and then I lifted.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it could kind of see,
cool.
but it was
it was partially
dark.
blind.
Yeah, legally blind.
couldn't drive a car.
No. If it had hands, it couldn't drive a car.
Yeah. But yeah, so that pike that I netted there was the prettiest fish I think I've ever held. Even the photos just don't do it justice.
It's almost like a purple.
Yeah, like those purple black Z-mans that we love using? It was like that, and just iridescent. By far, hands down, the prettiest fish I've ever held. It was fantastic.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
I'm happy you've had a good first couple days of the lodge. It's always hit the ground running right at the start of the season, right? So that's
for sure.
That's all good to hear. And a little bit quieter camp to start doesn't hurt either, just to kind of get things going. But it's all seasoned guides there now. I don't think there's any new ones, right? It's all repeat guides. So that's nice to get things going there. I think Adam said you guys did all the motors in one day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well.
We did 8. Yeah, Colby and I did 3 boats in one day, and then once Adam and a few other guys showed up, they crushed out the rest of them. So yeah, it was probably 10 hours of boats and motors, and gave us some time to do the little things around.
You guys actually got to fish.
Yeah, but there was so much ice, we couldn't.
True.
We couldn't go further than a mile and a half from the lodge. We were iced in until the guests showed up. Then we finally had a wind switch, and then we could fish most of the lake, thankfully. But
that works out well. Didn't have to fish all those boats, 6 boats or whatever, in a mile and a half area.
Yeah, we were all just like, hands on our head, like, this can't be happening. We're not getting iced in. And thankfully, it switched and made it work. So
very nice. Well, Jesse will be recording from the lodge until September, so get used to that background. Probably at some point some some drop-ins from some of the guys around
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah, the
it's
shore
nice.
lunchroom's just right beside me, so I'm sure someone's gonna barge in and make a ruckus here soon. I'll maybe fix the background a little bit here, but
Yeah, display some of the merch.
yeah, yeah, I'll space it out nice.
Yeah, for the people watching on YouTube, which you can do. And what are we at now? I don't even see the time of how long it's like 15 minutes already for the
17.
intro. So we've been rolling here. Um, I guess I'll just touch on quick before we get into it. I did fish the Riverhurst Walleye Classic this past weekend with frequent listener Cody McCartney as my partner. It was the first time I guess it wasn't really captained. It was my boat. I was driving everything like that, but I've never really fished at Riverhurst before. I'd done it once, like probably over a decade ago now, and didn't have a clue what I was doing. And then was there again probably before COVID, I think it was. And yeah, still didn't have a clue really what was going on out there. So why not fish in a tournament there when I hadn't even caught a walleye on Deef at that point. So showed up Friday night, went to the rules meeting, everything like that. And then it was go time on Saturday. Actually had a not too bad as far as everything went in the standings. I think we were like 39th out of 90 something after day one. So I wasn't upset with that. I can't remember how much Cody said he'd fished out there. I don't think it was a ton either. So we were pretty happy with that. We had the Bell brothers there. They listen as well. They've fished out there quite a bit. Carson and his dad have gotten second before. I think Carson said their big fish was the third largest ever in that tournament as well. So they've gotten second
their
in
big
it.
fish
So
this year.
no.
Was
When they got second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, whenever that was, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years, something like that. And I think it was like a 33-inch walleye, big fish. So had some good intel to go off of them, and yeah, it just was a Saturday went not bad. Like I said, 39th or something, and then Sunday, no bueno. I think we only weighed in 3 fish. Big mistake on my part that I've learned from. Every fish is important. We were on to our second spot Saturday morning, and Cody pulled up a wall. I had the net ready, like right at the water, ready to go, and it was like a 3/4 pound walleye. And I was just like, oh, just boat flip it. Like we'd caught like 25 fish or something the day before. I was like, it was the first fish today. I was like, oh, just boat flip it, lift the net out of the way. He goes, lift it up, bloop, into the water, gone. And then I felt so bad instantly. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like I should have, because like our first goal was 5, and then to kind of obviously go from there, right? So, and then it's like it's getting an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later, and we have like 1 fish. I was like, oh my god. And then where it really bit us in the ass is, yeah, there's the leaderboards for the whole tournament, but then we had our boat, and then Carson and his dad, and then Caleb with Bryden, which is their other brother there, and we were all separated by like 0.2 of a pound in the final standings, and we finished, I think it was 3rd out of the 3 teams. But literally, if we had that fish, I'm pretty sure it would have put us in the lead there. So yeah, learned from that one, but it was a fun tournament and a little bit more laid back than some of the trail ones, or especially the going up to the Vanity there. So it was a lot of fun. Such a cool area. Diefenbaker's a really interesting lake. I couldn't have asked for better weather. I didn't see another tiller in the tournament, and I think there's a reason for that on that lake. But it, like, Sunday was like uncomfortably hot, like not a breath of wind, just getting roasted out there, and then the fish aren't biting too, and it's like, oh my goodness. So yeah, had a good time, but learned some lessons.
How deep were the fish that you were catching?
Well, and that what, like, I was hoping for like a shallow bite, and just with some of the pre-fishing and stuff that Carson got to do and whatever, it seemed like we'd be out a little bit deeper. A lot of people are deeper. Like we were checking like 10 feet to like 30 foot, but there's so many goldeye out there. And for anyone who's used live scope enough, like I've found at least that I need to mark it. Like I mark that fish and I catch it, then I can kind of be like, okay, this is what a walleye looks like on this lake. Cause a walleye on live scope at Last Mountain looks a lot different than a walleye on live scope at Buffalo, which I'm looks different than deep. I didn't really actually, I think I maybe marked 2 where I was like, that's for sure a walleye. And the listeners might be wondering, like, how could you not tell? Well, there was so many goldeye there too, which lots of the walleye we were catching, like the biggest fish day one was only 6 pounds something, like say 6.5 pounds. So it's not a huge walleye, right, as far as tournaments go. So lots of the goldeye there are pretty long fish as well. So it was kind of, I'm sure I pitched at 95% goldeye near the bottom, thinking it was maybe a walleye, and then they chased it like a Cisco, and nothing happened. So that was kind of difficult. I wish I would have fished a little shallower. Or quite a bit shallower, and hunted a little more. We were hunting in the deeper water, in that like 15 to, well, more like 18 to 30. But wish I would have spent a little more or had more time to go and scope that out. But I mean, that's all part of the learning and whatnot. So yeah, ton of fun though. Still lots of talk on the water and stuff. So yeah, and the electric filleting knives that me and Cody both won, like the entry fee for the whole tournament for the team is $240, and those are like $214 a piece. So we kind of came out ahead in that aspect. Maybe not in obviously the total weekend aspect, but it was a nice consolation there. Kind of just like, oh man, we just got beat up today on Sunday. It's hot out. I made that stupid mistake with that walleye getting off, and then had that at least for the supper. I was trying to win. They had a $2,500 patio set with a fire table. I bought raffle tickets for that, and was waiting till the end to see if I won that. Make my girlfriend happy with that, but that didn't happen. But the knives were a nice little piece there. But yeah, we've kept this pretty long here. Almost at 25 minutes.
We should roll into this episode, I guess. We're jibber jabbering.
Yeah, no, we've got today we've got Scott Napper and Amanda Zimmerling. This is the connection is kind of Jesse's part of a project here with CWD. Just quick spark notes on it. Scott works in, would that be fair to say, vaccines, researching that.
And Vito, I believe, is the company.
Right.
Vaccine
and
something.
Yeah, sorry, Scott's gonna be listening. Sorry, Scott. But yeah, Scott's working with that, and then Amanda's working on the project to see how they can maybe find ways to administer potential vaccine once it comes up for CWD, and that's where Jesse comes in, and they met, and you'll hear all about that. Some general CWD talk, lots of the specifics too, as far as how it's transferred, how long it can stay in an environment, and it definitely opened my eyes up because I wasn't sure if this was you can let it go, do its wave through the population and be gone. That doesn't seem to be the case, but you'll hear more about that. And I don't know if you had anything else to touch on before we let the people hear it.
I think they're in to learn a lot, and Scott and Amanda do such a great job at explaining things at a very elementary level, even though they're talking about a very high educational, like above complex my head thing. And probably your complex things. And I think the people are going to enjoy it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So without further ado, here is episode 95, Everything CWD.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 95 of the Weekend Warriors Fishing Podcast. We got a special episode lined up today, something a little different. We're straying a little bit off into the hunting community, hunting world. We have 2 experts in the chronic wasting disease field. I'd like to introduce Dr. Scott Napper and Dr. Amanda Zimmerling, as well as my co-host Logan Lewis.
We're going to sit there.
Yeah, not a doctor. We're going to sit down and talk everything about chronic wasting disease in our province and probably Canada wide as well, or North American wide as well. Should be a ton of fun, guys. We'll start it off. And Dr. Scott Napper, how are you doing today?
I'm really good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
It's good just to call me Scott. We don't need titles here. I'm good with
sounds
that.
Good. We'll go with that. No, I'm doing well. I'm a little beat up from a bunch of driving to get up to the Northwest Territories here, but I'm looking forward to sitting down with you. I did a little research. You have been on podcasts before, correct?
Yeah, I've done a few of them. It's hard to remember off the top of my head, but yeah, there was one.
Right.
Yeah, the Beyond the Teacher that you mentioned with Nathan was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I took a listen to it, and my main takeaway from that was just like how well you were able to talk about very advanced things that I know nothing about, and just like dumb it down on an elementary level. And I think that's something our listeners are gonna really appreciate. It'll be good to have you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think, and I guess we'll go over to Amanda as well. Thanks for hopping on here. I think before we get into how this all kind of came to fruition, maybe just quickly introduce yourselves, kind of what field of study you're in, everything like that, and then we'll hop into some of the projects. So maybe if we want to start with Scott and then move over to Amanda and then go from there.
Sure. My name is Scott Napper. I'm a professor in the College of Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan in the Department of Biochemistry, Microbiology, and Immunology. And I'm also a senior research scientist with the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization, or VIDO. I'm a protein biochemist by training, and my research is in the development of vaccines for protein misfolding diseases. So things like the prion diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. That's the realm where I play.
Okay, awesome. And then Amanda?
So my name's Amanda Zimmerling. I am a doctor of biomedical engineering, but I currently work as president of One Health Medical Technologies, which is a startup here based in Saskatoon. And we work on everything from developing mechanical researcher tools to the wildlife vaccine world, more on the logistical and actual application side of things. So how do we take science and get it out into the world?
Okay, awesome. And then I guess before we get into your project, Jess, you want to kind of talk about how you and Amanda got together for the project and go from there?
For sure. Yeah. So a buddy of mine, Kale Moth, he messaged me on Instagram back in February, I'm sure, because I was ice fishing on Waterhen actually. And he had mentioned that, I think he worked with you, Amanda, right? That was the connection.
Yep.
And
we work together.
And he told me that you were looking for sites to set up this study, and that it was about white-tailed deer and CWD, and this something I'd be interested in. I said, well, yeah, send me her contact, and I'll definitely look into it. And yeah, that was February. Yeah, end of February. Got in touch with Amanda, and it intrigued me, and I wanted to help. So we went along with getting some sites out.
And have you guys actually met in person then?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good.
He gave me a tour of the property, so I knew where I was going, and told me the best spots to set up my cameras, or in this case, his cameras, so that we would be getting the best experimental data we could.
Yeah, well, you got a good guy for that. I don't know someone who has more trail cameras than Jesse, so.
I had a few extra to go around. I had to blow the dust off a few of them, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. And then Scott, how do you come into this triangle here?
I think the first time I met Amanda, I was giving a guest lecture in a graduate course talking about the CWD vaccine. She took an interest in it. And then a few years later, after she got her PhD, did all these amazing things, started this company, approached me and asked about some of the logistical details of how we would actually deliver the vaccine. And the short answer was, I have absolutely no idea. That's really not my realm. And she said that she would be able to assist in that. And she has been just an incredible asset in this, that it's one thing for us to develop a vaccine. It's another for us to be able to successfully get it out there in the wild. So that's where Amanda comes into play.
Okay. And I guess, Amanda, you'd probably be best to explain, like most people, when they think vaccines, they're thinking obviously a needle, right? But from my limited understanding of the project, this is a totally different approach, right?
Yeah, so Scott would also have a lot of good input on this, but when you're actually trying to get a vaccine to a wide-ranging wild population, you can't just go animal to animal and inject them with a needle. Obviously, there's no way that works. But what has worked previously, using the rabies vaccine as an example, is little oral packets that can be spread across a wide area, where then the raccoons or coyotes or whatever they're targeting for the rabies vaccine can come eat it and in doing so become vaccinated. There's a lot more challenges with that when you start looking at doing vaccination for deer, as they're significantly pickier eaters, but the same principles apply. In the easiest way to get oral vaccines to a wide-ranging population is feed.
Did you guys lose Logan first?
I
Yeah.
don't see him
Logan is
anymore.
gone.
Okay. I'll take note of that. I don't know if that's supposed to happen. That's never happened before. We lost Logan, but I'll text him. Yeah, because like as fun as it would be to drive around and dart wild animals with a helicopter or something, that just doesn't seem like the reasonable thing to do.
Yeah,
And it was one
probably
of
a
those
little
challenges.
a little bit time consuming.
Yeah, and cost a lot more money, I'm assuming.
Like when we were first developing the vaccine, we were also thinking about the farm cervids and how we could protect animals within that industry. But then it became clear, like the animals and the wildlife, that's the biggest problem that needs to get solved. So something that we could put out that the animals would just be able to eat it. And as Amanda said, the gold standard for that is the oral rabies vaccine that they use in Canada and in Europe.
Logan says he's coming back. He lost connection.
Thought it would be you, Jesse, Northwest Territories, but no, just Logan.
Yeah, didn't see that coming. He's never had an issue before.
So if we're going to talk crap about him, now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
I just met him, so I have no complaints, but
No, I've known him for 4 years now, and I don't really have any complaints either. So
nice.
he's
Except when he puts you on the spot to do intros.
except that it's a work in progress for that. Hey, there he is.
I'm back.
What happened?
I don't like I have great internet. I have like 1 gig download and then it just disconnects and then I am right back 30 seconds later. So I don't know. Ask Estel. I don't know what you guys got to. So,
well, what was the last thing you heard?
Last thing I heard was rabies.
That was mentioned.
That's the last thing I heard. That it just went black.
We were talking about how that was really the gold standard for vaccinating wild animals. So the vaccine that we developed, both in terms of the molecular details of it, really resembles the oral rabies vaccine. But then the challenge became for that rabies vaccine, which is designed for something like a fox or a raccoon, and they can either wrap it up in this really horrible smelling fish meal or this really sweet smelling marshmallow stuff, isn't going to be appealing to deer. So trying to figure out some of those details.
Okay. Yeah. That'd be the main purpose of this study is then I guess figuring out how you're going to get it into the deer, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And is this the first go of the study or has this been happening for a couple seasons now?
So, yes, Scott has been doing work for, a decade now on chronic wasting disease, on the actual development?
2 decades.
Ooh. Aging yourself there, Scott. You should have stayed with one. But yeah, Scott's been working on the actual vaccine for 2 decades. But as far as I'm aware, this is the first time we've started to look at the actual taking it out of lab. We're not using any pharmaceutical components out of lab, but actually seeing what we can get deer eat that we can also put vaccine in.
And the fact that we're now looking at how to deliver it should be interpreted as a sign of great optimism that we actually believe this vaccine is going to work, and start thinking about, well, once we have a working vaccine, how are we actually going to get out there? So Amanda is essentially here to solve the problems that we're going to encounter a couple of years down the road.
Okay.
And I have no doubt she's going to have all that worked out. So it's going to be completely seamless from the lab to a life trial. No
I
pressure,
like it.
Amanda.
Yeah. Yeah. That is exciting though, right? You wouldn't be getting to this point if you didn't have something that you thought could help with that, right? So I think that gave a good overview of what the project is, and maybe just take a step back. Like Jesse said, Scott, he liked how you were able to break things down and make it make sense to the average person who might not know as much. So for people that are listening, what is CWD?
So CWD is an entirely new category of infectious disease. It's a prion disease. Now, normally when we think about infectious diseases, you think about things like viruses or bacteria. This is something entirely different. It's a single protein that can cause infection. And what's even scarier about it, that single protein is in each and every one of us as we speak. And right now, hopefully within all of us, it's folded into one particular pattern that allows it to perform valuable functions in terms of copper metabolism and memory formation. But that same protein can fold into a different pattern. So if you think of like Transformers, it can go from a race car to a dinosaur. So you can take the same thing, fold it in a different way, and it has different characteristics. Now, when this protein misfolds, it takes on two new characteristics. So one, that it's pathological. So the presence of this misfolded protein on your neurons causes the neurons to die. So it causes this fatal, untreatable neurodegenerative disease. The other characteristic it takes on is that it's self-propagating. So when the misfolded form of the protein encounters the properly folded form, it causes it to misfold. So 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4. So as soon as you have one of these misfolded proteins within your body, it starts this cascade of misfolding events that eventually leads to your death. So a brand new category of infectious diseases, and a brand new way to think about proteins as well. That conventional theory was that they can only fold into one particular pattern, and that was it. Having a protein that can adopt two different conformations with such different characteristics associated about it was really a game changer in the protein world.
Okay. And with you saying that it's newer, how, I guess you've been working on it for 2 decades, you said. So, but that's still, I would say, newer in the form of biology, right? So kind of how new is it, and where did this start, or do we think that it started?
So where we first came to appreciation of what prion diseases were, it was at the end of World War II that New Guinea got divided in half, and the eastern half went to the Australians. And the Australians started to send in all of their people to investigate what was going on there. And they started to come back with reports of this strange disease called kuru, which in the local language translated to trembling with fear. Now, how kuru would present itself, it was fairly subtle off the beginning. You'd have a loss of coordination. You'd be stumbling a little bit. Eventually, it would reach the point where you couldn't even stand. You would just be sitting on the ground. Then you couldn't do that. You would just be lying on the ground. And as you were losing control of your body, you retained control of your mind, that you knew exactly what was happening to you, and you had seen enough other cases to know how this was going to end. You were going to die. Now, you maintain control of most of your mind, with the one exception being that people with kuru would go through these prolonged bouts of hysterical laughter. So you're lying on the ground, paralyzed, laughing hysterically. And so the big question was, what was causing this disease? And it didn't seem to be an infectious disease. There was no fever or inflammation. It didn't seem to be genetic, that it was going through family lines, and it didn't seem to be some environmental toxin. One of the things that was really interesting is that it was primarily the women and the children of the tribe who were coming down with the disease. Now, the reason that's interesting is because the 4 tribes had some unique and morbid beliefs about death, that they looked at it, once you died, you could either be buried or you'd be eaten by worms, or instead, you could be eaten by the people who loved you. So they had cannibalistic funeral practices where the recently deceased was the feast, and it was the women and children of the tribe who would consume the dead body. So right away, you seem to have this link of who was getting sick and this type of behavior. And so there seemed to be an obvious link, but initially the scientists, they refused to accept that on the basis that they knew other tribes were cannibalistic and they didn't have kuru. So for years and years, they didn't do the obvious experiment of seeing if kuru could be orally transmitted. they eventually did the experiment, and they showed that they took brain material of a young girl who had died of Kuru. They fed it to a monkey, and the monkey came down with a disease that looked a lot like Kuru. So this demonstrated it was transmissible and orally transmissible. The next big question was, well, what exactly is the nature of the infectious agent? And we have all sorts of procedures we can do that kill bacteria and viruses. They did that on this material. Absolutely nothing happened to it. The infectious agent seemed to be much smaller than any known bacteria or virus. And eventually they discovered that it was this misfolded protein that was causing it. Now, initially when they saw this, and it was a disease of cannibalistic tribes on the other side of the earth that, nobody paid that much attention to it. It just seemed to be like an episode of the X-Files or something, until in the 1980s, cows start getting sick. And all of a sudden you saw cows within the UK, they were stumbling around in their pens, they were becoming aggressive, they were losing weight, hypersalivation, brand new disease of cattle. That turned out to be a prion disease. What we saw there is that there were hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cows that got infected with it. And it turned out that was also a prion disease. And that had a bit of a cannibalistic origin to it as well. That when a cow started to get sick, quite often they would put it down, they would render it up for protein, and they would feed it to the other cows. So it seems one cow came down with this prion disease, they killed it, fed it to the others, and that's how you got the amplification of the disease. Once they figured out that's how it was being transmitted, they could get it under control with better management. So that leads us to the prion disease we're currently most worried about, which is chronic wasting disease, which is a prion disease of cervids. So that's things like deer, elk, moose. This seems to have started in the late 1960s. It was first identified in a farm in Colorado, but it's been spreading very aggressively since then. That currently, and it's hard to keep track of the numbers now, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Amanda, but it's been detected in, I think, 35 of the U.S. states and 5 Canadian provinces, in particular within Saskatchewan and Alberta is where we have tons of this. Now, the problem is that when you have this disease that's being spread in wild animals, you can't control it through better management. The animals are out doing what they're doing. And the infected animals, they release it within their urine and in their feces. And then when the animal eventually dies, there's all the prions that are in its body. They get taken up into the soil as well. So we're ending up with this rapidly spreading disease, and currently we don't have any tools to get it under control.
Okay.
So that's where we come in with trying to develop a vaccine for this.
Okay. And that's where obviously Amanda comes in now with the project and everything. So I kind of missed that with this part of the project specifically on how to get that vaccine to them. This is relatively newer.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So vaccine development has been ongoing, but
Okay.
yeah, trying to get it out and actually getting to a point where we have a very favorable looking candidate for a vaccine that we might actually be able to get out, that is quite recent.
Okay. And are you able to kind of talk about what that method is right now, or is that kind of under wraps?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a few things that we're investigating. So the vaccine itself is within a viral delivery system called human adenovirus 5. The challenge is putting it into some type of format where the deer will actually eat it. And as Amanda was saying, like, deer are notoriously finicky eaters. So in terms of what's going to bring them in and then something that they'll actually consume, one wildlife person, he gave me the example. He said, if you put out a bucket of feed for a deer and there's a few pebbles in it, they will eat all the feed and the pebbles will still be sitting there at the end of it. So we need something that would be appealing to them. They would take it up into their mouths to be able to deliver the vaccine to them. And when you look at the oral rabies vaccines, they're wrapped up in either the fish meal or the marshmallow coating, but then it's within this hard sort of plastic packet. Now, something like a raccoon or a fox, they'll just chew right through that and it releases the vaccine in their mouth. But for something like a deer, that's not going to work. And it was actually my teenage daughters came up with a proposed solution. They suggested, what about boba? So boba, if you ever go to Starbucks and you get those drinks with the little balls at the bottom of them, you take those up in your mouth and they burst and you get this blast of flavor. So their question was, if you put boba that tastes like something deer like and have the vaccine on the inside of it, is that something that would actually work? So that's one of the strategies we're considering right now. The other is whether we can put them into a dehydrated form that we can then mix with the food, that they'll eat it up. Something almost like if you've seen those Listerine strips for bad breath. You just put the strip in your mouth and it dissolves and away you go.
Okay.
Something similar to that.
Right. And I know from the little bit of work that I've done with the Saskatchewan Sportfish Research Group on some of their fish studies, there's so many different controls and different things that you're looking at within a study, right? So how is this something that you're able to deal with those controls, Amanda? Like how, because obviously like we talked about the trail cams and stuff, but this is obviously a lot different than a fish that's in your hands right now and you're dealing with it real time, right? So what's that going to look like?
Yeah, so there are a lot of variables with this experiment, and we're trying to hopefully tackle them a couple at a time. So the experiments we're running this summer are primarily based on determining, will deer eat either the boba form or the dry strip form? Will they eat it more if it's mixed in with a feed that is well known that they like, whether that be alfalfa or peas or just things that different outfitters use to bait with relative frequency? Can we mix our forms in with that and have them eat it? But then also the question of how complicated does our delivery system need to be? We're putting these tasty morsels out there. If they have vaccine in them, it's a pretty large financial cost, and we want as little of that to go to waste as possible. So do we have bears coming around and eating our supplies? Do we have birds or squirrels or other animals coming thinking this seems like a tasty snack? And then if so, how do we control that? So that's where my engineering background might come in, of actually building a control system and container that can dispense vaccine on demand. So it's kind of those findings we are really trying to figure out this time. And we have, I think we're at 37 sites across Alberta and Saskatchewan. And then we'll be adding a couple more actually in Texas in the near future with a collaborator down there to try to hit some more of the extremes. And then longer term, moving forward with the study, other things we need to look at is seasons. So obviously we're doing spring and summer. There's plenty of food around. Deer aren't necessarily going to be too driven to eat what we have out. So that's a factor, as well as having bears being more active than they would in the winter, which might cause problems in bear active areas. I can tell Jesse right now, the boba site that I put out, a bear absolutely loved it. Sat there for 3 hours eating boba.
I figured there was going to be a bear story coming because I seen Scott's reaction when you mentioned bear. I was like, oh boy.
The boba and the peas were thoroughly enjoyed by black bears. But that is part of the study and part of the findings. And we have other sites set up where bears are not going to be as common, and then we'll have some different findings. But related to season, winter in a lot of ways is likely the best chance, just because deer are going to be a lot more food driven. But then it comes down to vaccine stability. So while we're doing these outdoor experiments, testing the feed on wildlife, there's also ongoing experiments with Vito and Scott's lab going on right now to test, well, could we do this during winter? A Canadian winter, temperatures getting down to -50. Do we kill our vaccine? Do we kill our vaccine just getting below 0? And are we that limited in the temperature range we can do? But at the same time, if we're vaccinating in Texas and temperatures are getting to +50, again, is our vaccine alive? Are we still successfully going to be able to use the same vaccine setup and components and things like that? So all of these different variables are things that we're planning to test over the next couple of years, with a couple variables selected for this summer term.
And boba might just become an ice cube at -50.
Yeah.
It does. So I have both frozen and boiled boba as some of my testing. And yeah, the boba actually freezes quite nicely and thaws out quite nicely. So if the vaccine survives, the boba does too.
Good.
And that's what I absolutely love about this project. I mean, it's not just the consequences of it, but it's all these little problems that need to get solved. And what I take great assurance in is that most of these problems won't be solved by me. So you bring in the wildlife people, you bring in Amanda who can tackle this for you. And just watching that unfold is just so gratifying.
Right. Oh, for sure. And I was just thinking about even deer in different areas and what they're feeding on, right? Like that can change from Moose Jaw to Meadow Lake, right? So that's
For sure.
there's so much that could go into it. I can only imagine how long that list is of variables, like you were mentioning.
Well, yeah, any scientific research with a wild animal is gonna just be tough because they're wild animals. You can't control them. You don't know what they're gonna do. Every scenario would be so different.
But that's where we as scientists, I mean, we have to appreciate, like, I'm good at thinking about things at the molecular level, but I'm not a wildlife guy. And I remember the first time I was presenting this to a hunting group and we were talking about different investigations of what deer like. And this guy in camouflage, he just stands up and he goes, apples, deer like apples. And you start to appreciate, like, a lot of these problems have already been solved. It's just a matter of asking the right people the right question to advance what you're trying to do.
Right. No, that checks out. And I think that's interesting, like the way you get to kind of fool around with different ideas and like you can come up with some ideas and then you talk to some people that like the apples there. Like there's so much information out there, and then trying to bring that all together into an environment where you can study all that has got to be a whole nother game in itself there. But with some of the CWD stuff, is this something that I'm guessing affects each animal differently as far as how fast it progresses and everything like that?
So part of it depends upon the genetics of the animal. There's no such thing that we've seen so far of a completely resistant animal, but there's some who catch the disease quite quickly, others sort of moderate speed, and others at a slower speed. It's also going to be a matter of the infectious dose that they take up. But in any scenario, there's a pretty long latency period. So you're looking at anywhere from 6 to 18 months after they have that exposure before you start seeing the symptoms of the disease. So it's not like, somebody sneezes on you on the bus and the next day you're sick and you can think back and say, that's probably where I caught it from. That here there's a much longer period between that exposure and the onset of the symptoms.
Okay, that makes sense. And with my limited knowledge of it, I've always heard people say, "Oh, it's due to overpopulation." But would that be more of it's more prevalent in those areas because it's being spread and it's quicker to spread in those areas? Does that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're dealing with an infectious disease, population density is a big, big part of it. That the more animals you have close together, the easier it is for it to transmit. So it's probably not surprising, like the first place they saw CWD was within farmed animals. But one of the things that's unique about this disease is that the infectious agent is incredibly stable in the environment. So once it gets out into the soil, it doesn't go away, that it can persist for years and decades and be there in an infectious form. So, with the experiment, one of the experiments we're doing right now, we have a CWD farm in Wyoming where they had very high rates of the disease. They got rid of the animals. They tried putting healthy animals back on, and right away they got sick. So now we use that as an experimental site where we can take our animals, you can vaccinate half, leave the other half unvaccinated, put them onto this infected property, and then watch for disease progression. So it's a much more natural model that mimics what's happening within the wild.
Okay. And I think I think you had written this down, Jesse, but I think that plays quite well into the that would be basically your rebuttal to the fact that CWD is natural, let us take its cycle, right? Like from what I'm hearing there, if you do kind of let that happen, it might cycle through those deer, but it's still going to be present even without the deer, right?
Yeah. And when you do most of the modeling studies of, what will happen if we do nothing, it's from a very grim outlook of you're going to lose all the cervids to you're going to take them down to, very, very small populations. And a big part of it is due to that environmental contamination that it just doesn't go away. Now, that's not to say that at some point you might get animals who were resistant to it who come flourishing back, but that would be very much a long, long-term solution. And I frankly would rather not sort of hope and wait for that possibility when we have the opportunity to intervene.
Right. Yeah.
that'd
I
be
just learned
totally-
something new for sure right there with with how long it could sit around. I had no idea about that. So
Yeah, and definitely one thing that I've heard added to that rebuttal is the fact that as the disease keeps progressing, it's spreading to the larger geographic area. So we've seen it creeping north and further north and further north, approaching the caribou herds, which are already not in great shape. And I do believe we have seen that it can infect caribou, or it is highly suspected that it could.
okay.
So we're talking about our deer, we're talking about our elk, we're talking about our moose, and then we're talking about caribou numbers, which are already not great.
Right.
So
This goes a
looking
lot
at that
bigger.
risk is
A lot bigger than just the mule deer in someone's backyard in Saskatchewan, right? If it gets in the caribou herds, they're, like you say, their numbers
It's just going to explode.
Yeah.
especially just with the behavior of caribou, how they are all herded up all the time. How do you stop that spread?
Yeah. That's definitely something to think about. And when you were talking about the bears, it made me wonder, like when Scott, you're talking about how it can be transmitted. Obviously this isn't something that we've seen go into bears. Are they kind of the same as humans, and that they seem to be able to consume it and be fine?
And that's where it gets a little bit tricky, that there's species barriers to transmission. So you may have, from cattle to humans, it was relatively inefficient. So millions of people ate contaminated beef. Only a couple hundred people got sick. But we can't just worry about the direct transmission, that if you had a situation where it went from a deer to an owl to a gopher to a cow, and all of a sudden you have mad cow disease all over again, but it's coming from an environmental source, that's going to be pretty terrible. There's some species who seem almost completely resistant to any prion infection. There's other species that are highly susceptible from virtually any source, like bank voles can catch prions from virtually anything. And every time it goes through a new species, it has the opportunity to take on new characteristics and new animals that it can infect. So the more we have of it and the longer it's around, the greater the possibility that we're going to have something that's a direct threat to human health.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that. Like, obviously that's the main question for people. Can it transfer to people? I don't know. This might be a interesting little side topic, but I know me and Jesse are a little bit different in it. I haven't got mine tested yet. And if I knew they were positive, I don't know if I'd want to eat it or not. But if I don't know, I don't care. Kind of a silly way to look at it. Jesse, I think, doesn't care whether he knows it's positive. He's still eating it, right?
I did eat a positive mule deer, yeah.
Did you think about it with every bite, though?
For the first steak, I probably did, but then after that, it was like, it is what it is. No, it was fine.
And that's, it was obviously one of the big questions right off the start, is this transmissible into human beings? And we can't do the direct experiment of just taking a bunch of people and feeding them, infected meat. So what we do instead is that they feed it into monkeys, the closest sort of animal model we have. With the early versions of CWD, it didn't seem to be transmissible. But the other thing we're starting to appreciate about these prions is that they can evolve over time. So it's no different when we were looking at COVID, and all of a sudden you had these new variants with new characteristics, that prions can also evolve. And there was an experiment that was done in Alberta very recently where they showed they were able to orally transmit it into a non-human primate. So suggesting that threat, I mean, it's still, without a doubt, a very low threat, but it seems to be getting worse, and it seems to be moving in that direction. And again, not passing judgment on you, Jesse. Like, we all have sort of our ideas of risk assessment. I mean, I ride a motorcycle, which probably isn't the safest thing to do, but I love it, so I do it. Somebody who really enjoys hunting and, consuming the venison, I totally get that too, that, when the risk is that low, you're probably going to say, I'm willing to roll the dice on that.
Yeah, looking back at it, I think it was kind of a dumb decision. This was like 5 years ago.
I didn't want to go that far.
Yeah, because it's one of them things, geez, you'd hate to be patient zero. it'd be.
Well, to me, it's like you pull some lunch meat out of the fridge. It's a little slimy. You smell it and you think, well, it's probably okay. Are you going to eat it or not?
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, there is worse things, and even if people like in the boat I'm in, where if I don't know, I don't care. Obviously, there's the chance it could be negative as well, and it's totally fine. But I don't know, and so my main reason is the main reason I would ever do it, obviously, is for the science side of things, and that's the main reason Jesse's doing it as well is for that. My only thing is I haven't shot as many deer as Jesse as well. So I I wanted to get a Euro mount done. And obviously that with giving the head, I think, is there, if I'm not mistaken, a second method about some glands behind the ear or something that can also be given? Is that true?
Yes. And they can also do it with some rectal follicles. There's ways to do it as well. But the most efficient way is through submission of the head. One of the problems with that, especially when we're talking about some of the northern communities, is how do you collect all of these heads in a reasonable way, get them back here for testing, and then get answers back to the hunters in a reasonable amount of time. One of the things they're looking at that in terms of getting the portions of the brain out, like, can we teach the hunters how to do that so they can go in and just collect those samples? So all of a sudden, it's not a matter of like you have this huge freezer full of heads. You've got something that's much more manageable in size.
Right. Yeah, that has to be a pretty big freezer, and probably not the most clean job either, from what I've heard. Hey.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the ideal would be if we could have a field test that you could do. So right after you get your animal, you can do the test right there. And I know there's a number of researchers who are working on that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be a hot seller off the shelves.
Sure.
Or if it's just kind of given out. Like, I know I've just some of the citizen science projects that, like, say BC has going on with their sturgeon, and lots of the guides helping with their tagging and stuff. That would be something sweet if you could get down the line. But obviously, going back to talking about variables and controls in a study, that public element doing some of that is a big what if, right? With some of that.
So as wildlife guys, you would be receptive to that?
100%. I would. I shouldn't speak for Jesse, but I would.
No, you got a pause there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think.
Yeah, I have to say,
Oh,
so
ahead.
I called a whole bunch of different outfitters and hunters and landowners when I was starting to get this set up, looking for volunteers like Jesse, who had access to land and trail cameras, that they were willing to volunteer for this experiment. And almost all of the individuals I talked to who kind of live and breathe in this wildlife world were all in. They were super supportive, and even if they couldn't lend their time or equipment, they were full of information on what baits to try, what locations to try. Here's the contact of the next person you should call. They'd probably be interested in, like, everything like that. So the public input that I've been able to receive, at least working through those channels, has been so positive and great to work with.
Mm-hmm.
It has been
awesome
so
to hear.
cool and so gratifying. We've been talking with the wildlife groups for years, and they're always so supportive. They bring us to their conventions each year. Just to have that encouragement, to have their advice, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the common thing when you get people that aren't in the outdoor scene, or I don't know, we'll say some activists or something that's maybe against hunting, and they don't realize that the people participating in the hunting or the fishing would argue they care more about the animal or the fish than someone who's just protesting the act of fishing or hunting, right? Like, they usually the outdoors community really cares about what they are spending the majority of their free time doing, I think is the main thing there. So that's the nice thing. You can build pretty good, helpful community when it comes to the outdoors. And obviously you guys found that out pretty quick getting into that. Because do either of you do much in the hunting or anything like that?
Yeah, I am an avid hunter and fisher woman. But I grew up, both my parents are professional biologists. Both of them are hunters and fishers. So that was part of my life since I could walk. Mm-hmm. Like, my parents would take us out when they'd go duck hunting, and we'd be sitting in a blind, watching them shoot and cheering them on. A little bit older, we were the ones handling the dog for retrieving. we'd be sitting in the truck on deer hunts with our little binos to radio our dads when we watched them walk across the road in front of us. Like, you missed one. We found it. So yeah, I still hunt and fish across Alberta and Saskatchewan, and I love it.
Okay. Yeah, so that makes it easier too, knowing lots of that getting into this study, right? So no, that's pretty sweet. Do you have anything there, Jesse?
Well, Scott had mentioned that this disease is evolving from what you've noticed in the last 50, 60 years. Does that mean, are there deer wildlife also evolving with the disease, or are there certain regions of animals that seem more resilient to it than others, or is it kind of just totally on the disease side of things there?
Yeah, like in the, the grand scheme of things. So when you say like the disease is 60 years old, that seems like a long time to us, but in sort of biology terms, that's the blink of an eye. So especially when you're dealing with, things like mammals that don't reproduce very quickly, it's going to take a long time before you start to see them shifting in response to this type of pressure. They are seeing that some of the genotypes with different resistances are starting to change a little bit, but to a very slow extent, that the prions can evolve a lot faster than the animals can.
So it's a losing battle for them.
At least for, the short and even midterm, and the concern is, like, we've always got to think of, how bad is it now, but how bad could it get? And if this goes into a form that is transmissible into humans and can cause disease, I mean, that's going to have huge implications. That one of the things we also know is that plants grown on prion-infected soil can take up prions and present them in an infectious form. So it wouldn't just be a matter of, stop eating venison. It would be, any crop grown in North America could potentially, yeah. So, and again, that hasn't happened yet, and that's a very dim possibility, but we've always got to be thinking ahead of, what's the worst case scenario. And here the worst case scenario is pretty damn scary.
Right. And that plays into Jesse's deals with more bait, I guess, setups than I do down here in the South. Is that something that you would think that baiting is causing the faster spread of it, given that you've kind of got a potential hot zone that a lot of the deer are coming to?
It's certainly not going to be helping that any time you're getting the animals to congregate together, you're increasing the likelihood that they are going to transmit disease. Now, I'm not a wildlife guy, so I don't know how different that is, when they have their natural mating season, when they come together and all of that, how much worse this would be. But yeah, certainly the more you bring the animals into close contact, you increase the possibility of disease transmission.
Okay. Which I guess makes sense, but that you give a good flip side of they're going to be together other times as well. So is this really changing that?
Yeah, bit of a grain of salt there.
Yeah, and I mean, we're saying that as people actively running an experiment with bait.
Right.
So
true.
As much as we're saying that, if you're already in an area that has a high rate of infection, there's absolutely no way to tie it back to the bait site. They could be picking up from their water source. They could be picking up from a farmer's field. You don't know. And as much as Scott was saying, from the understanding of the disease and how it works, yeah, baiting by no means helps, but there's no way and no study currently scientifically that has actually been able to show that baiting harms. Just because deer herd up during certain times, they congregate at water sources and random bales left in a farmer's field.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to say, yes, that's the cause. I don't think that's accurate, but yeah, it definitely doesn't help.
Right. No, that's fair. And it seems like obviously this is not something good. So there's a lot more things that can harm than do good. But what is some things in relation to CWD and whether it's its transfer or the population that is infected with it growing, what's some good things that people can do? Like, my only thinking is, if you obviously saw one that had CWD, is taking it out of the population. Would that be something under those lines? Would that be kind of the only good you can do right now?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But so far, the efforts to try to control the spread of disease through culling and other measures like that haven't had much impact.
Hmm.
So far, I would say that we really don't have many effective tools to get this under control. And again, it's not just the infected animals, that it's once the infection is out there in the environment, even if the animals go away, the infectious material is still there. And that's part of the big challenge of this too, that this isn't going to be something we're going to be able to, come up with an effective vaccine and 2 years down the road, there's no more CWD. This is going to be a much longer term solution that even if we can stop new animals from catching it, we still have to worry about all of the material that's still out there. And we don't have a good sense of how long it lasts. And there's a lot of groups looking at ways to try to decontaminate these environments. But so far, there's nothing that's really practical that's been developed that could be implemented.
Okay. Interesting. You're thinking, Jesse. What are you thinking?
Well, as he mentioned about the plants, I was like, oh, if only they could think of a way to like spray it, like you spray weeds in your lawn and it would kill it. But then he just said there's nothing practical, or they haven't come up with anything. So
I mean, this is like when Trump was saying you can cure COVID by injecting bleach into people. Like, he wasn't completely wrong, but at the same time, like, you're killing everything else too.
Right.
And, we have things they can do. So they've shown, like, if you can take dirt and you can put it into autoclaves, you can even do some really robust composting to help speed up the process. There's a few plant species that can degrade it faster. There's a few more natural chemicals you can put out that help neutralize it. But where it all falls apart is when you think about the magnitude of the problem. Like, this isn't in one small area like a football field. This is all over North America. So trying to come up with something on that scale, like, it's just not there yet.
Right. And then there's the issue of the public. And once that comes out, say the fix was crop dusters spreading this all over North America, I'm sure there'd be some pushback along something like that, right?
Wouldn't go over well.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that could be, the word practical is quite important with lots of that. So you gonna say something, Jesse?
Well, even on that note, like, do you think the general public would push back for a vaccine for the cervids out there? Like, I don't know. I'm on the fence of like, yeah, get it out there, but that's speaking of a wildlife, hunter, person who wants to see deer around. But I could also see there being a couple old farmers that are like, I don't want no vaccinated deer around here. Like, I ain't eating that. I'd rather eat the disease. Like,
I mean, part of the team we're on, it's this multidisciplinary team, and part of it is surveying producers and the public to see what their opinion of a CWD vaccine would be and how receptive they would be to it. Obviously I'm biased, but to me, this is something that should be celebrated. But, here we are coming out of a pandemic where a vaccine was developed that saved 30 million lives, and yet we have more vaccine hesitancy now than we did before the pandemic. I think it would be interesting. I mean, anyone who's consuming, beef, I mean, guess what? Those cows were vaccinated. That these vaccines for rabies have been used in the environment for decades and decades, to help control this absolutely terrible disease, and everybody seems okay with that. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the perception of it is.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess there's more that to the research than just chronic wasting. So like all the info and if we can get a vaccine for CWD, that should lead into research or into promising vaccines for Alzheimer's, correct?
100%.
So like,
Yeah,
if
those
anything,
are prion-like diseases. Yeah.
So people should be on board with this research and what you guys are doing, because that affects people very directly. And the whole,
I've kind of finished trying to predict how the public will react to these things. To me, that just seems like such an obvious, like, anyone who's ever had a family member, who's gone through Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, those are diseases I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. That if we had a way to be able to prevent those, you would hope that would be something that could be sort of universally celebrated, but I don't know. I've actually got a health studies student in the coming term who's going to be doing a survey of the public to see how they would feel about an Alzheimer's vaccine. And I'm hoping it's going to come back with a positive result, but yeah, we'll see.
Mm-hmm. So I had heard some things about Alzheimer's dealing with like I don't know, I could be totally off here, but as like a type 3 diabetes. Does that have any merit to it?
That there's a version of diabetes that's also a prion-like disease.
Okay.
And so what all of these diseases, Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, type 3 diabetes, they involve a protein that's present within you going into this pathological conformation that then self-propagates. So it causes other versions of itself to misfold. So it's this amyloid structure. So they all have that common denominator, and they all face the same challenge of when you're developing a vaccine, how do you develop a vaccine that's going to specifically target the misfolded species? That this isn't like a normal infection where there's the bacteria and there's you and there's a clear divide between the two, that this is part of your own body that's kind of turned against you. So it's almost more like a cancer with the same challenges of cancer therapy. How do you target the cancer cells and leave the healthy cells alone? So having the specificity of the vaccines is huge, but they're also challenged that because these are self-proteins, your body goes to great lengths to not induce immune responses against self-proteins. So to get these types of immune responses, it's something called breaking tolerance. And this is why it's taken us 2 decades to get this far, is we had to come up with strategies that gave us that specificity, but also gave us the ability to break immune tolerance so we can induce these responses. So in terms of vaccine development, I mean, this is about the toughest nut there is to crack. It doesn't get any worse than this, or more important, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And kind of one last thing on CWD before we hop into Amanda's project a little more. How long do you think people were consuming deer and everything before this really became on the forefront, or people started to really worry about it? Like, I always think about that when I'm like, I always say people have been eating this and not knowing it for probably a long time. And what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it really didn't hit sort of public attention until I would say the 90s. I mean, I remember back in the days, where everybody seemed to be starting up a cervid farm and just making tons and tons of money off of it. And then CWD came along, and that industry just took such a massive, massive hit that for people who are regular hunters, yeah, you've probably been eating this for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at, in particular, we are like Saskatchewan and Alberta, those are the real hot zones within Canada.
Right. No, that's fair. I mean, it's also kind of funny that, I mean, it coincides with probably 2 of the best provinces for hunting, I would say, or especially as far as trophies go too. So I find that kind of interesting. And obviously that maybe just has to do with the populations that we're lucky enough to have around here too. But I don't know. I haven't ever seen it myself in person, but I'm guessing, Jesse, you've seen some cases and stuff like that.
I've come across a couple deer. Obviously can't confirm it, but that were, yeah. The only thing I could think of for them to act like that was, yeah, CWD. Like just very, very scrawny looking, very dumb, wandering around midday. So,
That checks the boxes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, under 100 pounds on the hanger when they're a whitetail buck. Or my neighbor had said that. I had asked him if he wanted some venison because he said his had tested positive, and the butcher's like, I'm not even going to touch that. They hung it on the hook, and I think it was under 100 pounds, and it was a whitetail buck. And he's like, yeah, we're not even going to worry about about dealing with that one. But
jeez,
I guess getting into some of your project there, Amanda, are you just trying to get these bait stations wherever, or are you focusing on areas with higher CWD as well?
So the goal of these experiments, geographically, were to spread them as far across Alberta and Saskatchewan as we could, and then Texas was an added bonus. But we have sites spanning from, I'd love to say northern Saskatchewan. It's what we generally consider northern Saskatchewan, but we'll say kind of mid-central Saskatchewan, not well up into the northern forest or anything like that, down to the southern tip of Saskatchewan. And then Alberta, same thing. We got quite far north in Alberta, down to the southern tip of Alberta as well, and we have sites spread across that entire region.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. You want to find out what's going on all over the place, and then once you do figure that out, you can focus on and get the vaccine in there. You can focus on some of those higher infected areas, I guess, right?
Yeah, primarily that lets us knock out more variables, just looking at how the different behaviors change versus being in farmland, being in forest, being further north, being further south. So getting that spread lets us take a look at more variables. Because with the number of sites we have, we're able to run the same experiments at the same time at different sites at different geographies, and then we can compare that data.
Okay.
So as much as there are too many variables for this to provide what we would consider scientific significance, when you run statistics or anything like that, it will give us a very good sense as to what's going on, along with all of the knowledge that the different outfitters and hunters have that we can kind of use to back it up as well.
Okay. No, that's fair. And I'm guessing somewhere down the line, this will be a paper, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not in academia anymore, so
Okay.
it always makes me happy that the final product that I'm going for isn't a paper. It's the actual application of this,
Right.
which I love. But yes, we will definitely be putting all of this data together in a manuscript form, along with the different conservation agencies we're working with and collaborators and Scott and his lab. And that'll all be going together to get published in some format, whether it's with a scientific journal or just out there for people to be able to use and reference.
Right. And the main reason I'd asked that is just from my limited paper writing. There's not as much paper writing in accounting when you go to school for that. But kind of, what was your hypothesis going into this? Like, what were you thinking would come out of this study?
Primarily, I figured other animals would be an issue. If we put bait out, I figured we would have a lot of different animals that would want to eat it as well. Currently, that is appearing the case. We're 5 weeks into the experiments now, and that definitely appears to be the case, which means we can't just put the bait out. We'll need a control system around it. Further, we are seeing the animals prefer the liquid form so far, but the dry form just got out and hasn't been mixed with different baits yet. But they will eat our little boba balls without other baits in them. Currently have not seen them do the same with the dry film. So that one might need to be mixed with bait in order for it to be taken up. But that will be figured out over the next couple weeks and then repeated again later this summer. Another thing we're expecting running this all spring and summer is that we'll have more uptake by deer in the spring and less later in the summer when there is all the food available they really could want.
Mm-hmm.
So then we're competing with their favorite natural sources. We're still hoping that our bait wins out because it's a special treat, but that may or may not be the case, and we will find out later.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Are you going to continue to run your sites year round, or is this just going to be a spring, summer, fall? Or are you going to keep going into winter?
For this year, it is just spring, summer. And then based on findings and unfortunately based on funding, because research takes money, which is a very unfortunate truth,
Mm-hmm.
Then we will hopefully be able to run the same or similar experiment, making changes for what we learned through this term, through an entire year, and get all the seasons.
Sweet. Yeah. The funding's the worst thing about that all. It's just there's so much more that could go on if the funding wasn't an issue. It's always unfortunate when you hear about that. But I mean, like even with some of the fish studies I'd heard about and one method of the study, they end up kind of with the same thing, but one method being way more money just doesn't happen as often. It might yield more results and everything like that, but just due to that. And then to me, you just end up spending more time doing slower things, we'll say, and when you could be more advanced. But I don't know, Scott, looks like you're ready to say something there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's always, what you want to do and what needs to get done versus what you can afford to do. And especially with projects like this, if you're doing experiments on mice, they're nice and cheap and easy to get. You want to do experiments on a deer herd, that's a little bit different in terms of difficulty and cost. And because of that, you see a lot of prion researchers using the mouse models, but those findings don't tend to translate across. It's like the old saying, they've cured cancer in mice 100 times, yet here we are. That to do it in the relevant species is so critical, but for most researchers, that's not even an option.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, and for you dealing with just any vaccine in general, like how long are you having to work on something before you're like, we can go out and celebrate, like we finally like made a breakthrough? Like I feel like that's got to be a pretty long process, hey?
Yeah, you got to celebrate all the little victories along the way. You can't just wait for the final one. But I mean, to me, that's the thing that's been so cool about this. It seems every week there's another problem to solve where you kind of have to take these 2 steps back. You swear a little bit, but then you stop and think about it. You consult other experts and you figure out a way past that problem. Yeah, that's very much what scientific research is about.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like that would be the definition of a grind. with lots
sure.
of that.
No, it'll break your spirit and your heart if you're not careful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I definitely have learned a lot so far. If there was something that either of you could have input here on, probably what you think is some of the most interesting things in relation to CWD that you found so far?
To me, it's definitely just the unique nature of this disease, that this self-protein can go into this form to cause these absolutely horrific consequences. And then to start to think about, where this could go and what the possibilities will be, that, when you study prions, right from the very beginning of showing up in cannibalistic tribes, that with every chapter that gets written about it, it just gets stranger and stranger and more important, which to me just sets the stage for us, to have this huge victory of finally coming up with something that builds upon all of this information from hundreds and hundreds of scientists who've been studying it to finally get this under control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. You have anything on that, Amanda?
Well, I actually had a question for Scott, because I was talking to one of his summer students the other day, and she asked me a question that I couldn't fully explain. What is it that makes this misfolded protein so indestructible? Why does it have to be incinerated or absolutely doused with bleach? Why is it so stable?
That it forms beta sheet structures where every peptide bond within the polypeptide chain can hydrogen bond with the one next to it, and that the side chains, because they're all going to be identical and characteristic, are going to form these almost zippering interactions that bring the whole thing together. That's where the stability comes from, this amyloid structure. It's a lot of weak interactions coming together to form something very, very strong. Do you guys watch Mythbusters at all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great show.
Religiously.
The episode where they took the phone books and they put the pages and then they couldn't pull them apart. It's a bunch of weak interactions creating something incredibly strong. That's what happens with the prions.
You had totally lost me for the first minute of that explanation, but then you just brought it right back. I'm like, I get it now. This is great.
Pulling it apart.
Yeah. Jesse actually role plays as is it Jamie from Mythbusters?
Yes.
Yeah, I see it. Put the beret on there, away we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
My sunglasses I wear are very deeply inspired by Jamie's.
That's true.
The stash too. Yeah, you got it going on.
Yeah. No, that's good. Jesse, do you have anything else on the CWD topic? Because I totally forgot we have some of the listener questions too.
That's right. Let's look back here. we kind of answered it already, but are there any environmental factors that restrict or control CWD? I guess you kind of just went over it, like extreme heat. But there's no like, is there a cold or moisture? Like, would a grass fire sweep through and take out all the contaminated soil, or that's not good enough?
No, I mean, even when you're talking about prion infected meat and people saying, well, if I cook it, isn't that going to inactivate it? Like you would have to cook your steak down to ashes before you're going to be getting rid of the prions. So no, that's not going to do it. There seems to be different soils that make it more or less transmissible, and there's certain clays that seem to bind it. And then when the animals are kind of, snuffling on the ground to eat grass or whatever, it's more transmissible from those soil types. So things that can make it worse, but no, nothing that really gets rid of it.
So a clay soil that holds high moisture makes it worse or more spreadable, right?
Yeah,
Is that what
like
you're saying?
it seems to be able to bind onto the particles within the clay, and
Okay.
that gets taken up in a more effective form in the animal.
Okay, that makes sense. I just thought of one before we get into that too. I've had some people say like, well, I'm not going to eat any of the organs. Like that's where it's going to be. Is it basically, if it's in it, it's in it. And it doesn't matter if you're eating the heart or the liver or the backstrap.
You're going to find more of it in the brain and spinal cord, but with CWD, it's present within the muscles as well.
That's fair.
I
I
feel
use it
like,
for
yeah.
leech bait anyway, so I'm not too too worried about the liver, but
For leech bait?
yeah, for trapping leeches for walleye fishing.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Well, good. Now we Scott learned something today too, so that's good.
Any dugout around you, go to a farmer's field. If that dugout's been there long enough, there'll be leeches in it for you.
So you just dangle raw liver in there and they attach to it?
In a sense, it's funny, just 2 episodes ago, we had like half an hour on leech trapping. It's just as simple as a dollar store visit, and you fold a pie plate in half, tie onto one end, some elastic bands in the middle, and then fold over the edges a bit. And then inside I throw a rock and then some liver or chicken liver, beef liver, and then toss that out into the dugout in a couple of feet of water, and then come check it as early as you can in the morning. And they're usually in there loving life, for the ribbon leeches at least. I don't know about other species of leeches, but that's...
So you fish for the leeches to use the leeches to go fishing.
Yeah, because if you go... So, perfect example, out at Buffalo Pound Lake here, just north of Moose Jaw, my buddy had bought 12 leeches from the gas station. I think it came after tax and everything. I think it was like $10, something like that, for a dozen leeches. Well, he was gone those were gone in about 5 minutes due to the insane perch population that we have there, and he didn't even catch a single walleye with them. So he was basically feeding perch for almost $1 a leech, whereas you can go trap some leeches and whatever. I drive 10 minutes out to mine and I'll spend an hour checking traps, and I could end up with, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 dozen pretty quickly. So
yeah, a couple hundred pretty easy.
Yeah. It's a budget thing. And then you can also get some bigger ones. If you find a good dugout, you can get ones that are even bigger than what's available in the gas stations. Usually, what do you say, Jesse? The gas stations are like a good large size?
I'd say on average, they're like a medium large, like 4 or 5 inches maybe,
So some guys,
leech.
Yeah, some guys make money. By the time tournament season really gets going, especially later into the year, these jumbo leeches, they could go up to $1, $1.50 a piece. Maybe even $2, depending how late you're able to keep them. So it's
So does anybody breed leeches just for that purpose?
See, that's interesting. If you look it up, there's apparently, maybe from my research, one guy, I think it was in Michigan, he might have figured it out, but otherwise there's nothing on it. Anyone who's doing it commercially, they're going out and checking traps and figuring that all out themselves. Yeah, I don't know how it works. I've tried looking it up because I have a thing of mealworms going right now for once ice fishing season comes back around. But as far as leeches go, and if you figure it out, you'll be a very wealthy man.
You probably do very well. The guys who do figure it out are probably going to keep it very hush hush. But yeah,
Scott's going to give up on CWD. He's going to go to leeches.
Just dive into leech farming.
Yeah. No, that's good. Should we get into some listener questions here, Jesse?
Yeah,
Wrap
I think
things
that'd
up.
be good. For sure.
Because we're not missing too much of the Oiler game yet.
No, we're doing all right.
Yeah. You want us to kick it off?
Yes, let me bring it up. Well, Fecal Guide, Zach Brown, otherwise known as Zach Brown, he asked, would you eat a deer with positive CWD results? I feel like that would be a strong no from each of you. No?
I'll go as far as a hell no from me.
I'll say definitely still no, but a weaker no.
Mm.
Like, I know what the chances are. I've been having deer my whole life.
Yeah.
Still no.
Yeah.
But
We should maybe listen
I
to the people that
understand.
know what's going on, Jesse.
Yeah.
I understand people who do.
Yeah.
Still no.
I think my main reason that I'm probably a no as well, but the only reason I would consider it is just because I hate wasting. But it's literally in the name, so maybe you should.
That's a good point.
Are you going to change your mind now, Jesse?
Yeah. No, I'll get rid. I won't eat the next one.
Right. Well, this next one here comes from R. Carter Outdoors. He says he's asking if it's safe for human consumption. We've kind of touched on that, but I think something that could be good is he also says signs before you pull the trigger. So maybe touch on some of the obvious signs that someone could pick out maybe before they decide to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when Jesse was listing off those characteristics, he absolutely nailed it of, a scrawnier animal, that's acting unusual, like dumb, doesn't have the usual survival instincts associated with it, hypersalivation. Those would be the things to look out for.
Okay. No, that's good to know. What do you got next, Jesse?
Cameraman Richie asked if there's any promising vaccines. Obviously, that's what you guys are here for, is the vaccine. But I guess I know it's probably very hard to answer, but any realistic idea of when a vaccine could be authorized? Like, obviously, you've made headway because you're doing the field research now, but is there any way you can give some sort of a time frame or just an answer for that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a long process that even after we have a vaccine that we know works in terms of getting the regulatory approval, in terms of scaling it up, I mean, those are some major challenges we have to overcome. We currently have challenge trials taking place in cervids using environmental contamination models. So if our vaccine works there, that is going to be a huge step forward in terms of getting a commercialized product. But the problem is those studies take years to complete. So you have to have the animals on there, for at least 18 months before even the unvaccinated ones are going to get sick. And then you have to be looking at how long after that your vaccinated don't. We also have to be looking at what does success look like? That we're not trying to protect individual animals, we're trying to protect populations of animals. So even if we can't stop an animal from getting sick, but we can reduce the number of prions that it's generating and shedding into the environment, that would still be a really valuable tool to get the disease under control. I would say, like, absolute best case scenario, if we were looking, 5 to 10 years of having a commercialized product, that would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a very solid answer there.
Yeah. Do you want to take this? I think we kind of answered the ones I'd sent you, Jesse. So do you want to take the last one there?
The last one
from Lane?
Oh, yeah. My cousin Lane Cadron, he asks, what do you think the answer is with mule deer, and why aren't they handling it as well as whitetail? So yeah, why are the mule deer affected heavily compared to a whitetail?
I'm going to turn that one over to Amanda. I think you probably have a better sense of that.
I wouldn't be surprised if that is more behavioral. Just first of all, where we see more whitetail or mule deer versus whitetail, at least in my experience, though I know it differs geographically, they seem to be herded up a little bit more. I've definitely found them more on the farmland in groups, but that's my perspective. I don't know if we actually know scientifically why that's the case, unless, Scott, you know something about their genetics that I don't.
No, and I don't get the sense it's a genetic difference. I suspect you're right that it's a behavioral thing.
Okay. So it's just of, yeah, they're a group animal where they're eating, they're concentrated more, spreads faster, affects them sooner. Um, so just as what we're seeing now, the whitetail will follow suit. It's just going to be more delayed.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
going to
that's
take more
interesting.
time, but they're going to be just as impacted.
There's no like resiliency difference from the each of them. They're each gonna succumb to CWD eventually.
And that's the tricky thing too. Like when you look at the animals who are like more resistant to it, they still catch it and eventually die of it, but it takes longer. The problem with that is the longer they're alive while being infected, the more opportunity they have to be releasing it into the environment. So in some ways, that's almost worse. An animal that catches it and dies very quickly, there's going to be less environmental
Yeah.
contamination.
Yeah. And would it be probably differ from not so much a species to species, but like individual animal to individual animal, like same as how a human is more susceptible to picking up a cold. Would it work the same in the deer world for this, or this is my own question now? It's not related to Lane or nothing, but
It seems relatively consistent, and I think part of it is because you're already dealing with such long latency periods. So when you're talking, from 6 to 18 months, if it's a few weeks different either way, that kind of gets lost in the wash. Whereas if we were talking about something like the flu, if I caught it the next day and you caught it a month later, that would be absolutely huge. But with the long latency periods, it almost becomes more sort of background noise.
gotcha.
There we go. That kind of covers it. We had lots of questions, but some of them just kind of multiples or things that we had already
Mhm.
covered there. But I guess oh, go ahead.
I did have one more, Logan, that I didn't send to you.
You're keeping it a secret.
No, just because it was in my brain and I forgot. Anyway, I actually forget who even mentioned this to me. It was during my 16-hour drive the other day. I was on the phone. I don't know who it was. Anyway, somebody asked. They're like, you should ask him if wild boars will ever be susceptible or contract chronic wasting disease.
That is an excellent question. And by how Amanda lit up, I'm going to turn that one over to her too.
I was going to say, I haven't seen science of them being able to be infected. Again, Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong in that, but it's probably kind of similar to the human case,
Gotcha.
where as the prion can change, it will definitely become an issue. Well, definitely, very long term could become an issue, as much as it would be a very small chance of that being the correct change in the misfolding to be able to be infect the wild boar. But if it did, obviously that's going to be another huge problem with how far they're spread, where they are, and our inability to manage them as a population, as proven thus far.
Sure.
When you
And then
think of
oh, go ahead, Scott.
the different animals respond different ways to prion diseases, that if in boars it made them, more aggressive, that again, you could have sort of this nightmare situation. I think they have shown that it can be transmitted, at least experimentally, to pigs. And I was curious, Amanda, when you met with Ryan Brooks.
Ryan Brooks, yeah.
Yeah, did he mention at all whether they were concerned about that within wild boars?
No, he made no mention of CWD in wild boars. Yeah.
Wild boars are the cockroach of animals, I guess. Indestructible, in a sense.
Well, and I guess if we ever do see a case of a wild boar positive with CWD, like that'd be a pretty big wake up call to the rest of the rest of the world. Like, oh crap, if it's going to them, we're probably gonna be next.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, you guys are probably too young to remember, but living through the mad cow crisis, pretty damn scary times of thinking that, the foods you enjoy on a regular basis suddenly have the potential to cause, this type of horrific disease.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty scary times.
Well, that's when hunters were like, well, I'm fine. I get my own food. And now the CWD's really reared its head. And people
Yeah,
that eat cows are like, ah, well, now you guys are having to deal with that. Yeah. No, that's, I, I learned so much this episode. That's why I love doing this podcast. I learned so much with it. I guess with your study, Amanda, are you looking for more sites still?
Currently, no. We have filled
Okay.
up as many sites as we are financially capable of handling at this time, but we will definitely be hoping to run more experiments in the future. And I need to say a huge thank you to all the individuals who have been helping us so far, because for the budget that we're working under, this wouldn't be possible without the landowners and outfitters like Jesse and the Alberta Conservation Association being two main ones, along with others. But they've been supplying the trail cameras. They've been supplying their time so that we can actually get staff to handle these stations across this wide geographic area. It would not be possible without that support. So I can't say a big enough thank you, because it would not happen without the citizen science or the, I guess, the biologists giving us a hand in some cases as well.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess to kind of wrap things up here, we've been going for almost an hour and a half, so want to let us all get back to the hockey game here. But I guess usually I ask the guests like where they can be found on socials and stuff, because they're usually whatever it's a guide or something like that. Is that something that pertains to you guys? Like, where can people see some of the stuff you're doing and kind of get more information and stuff?
Or if they had any questions to follow up after listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, they're welcome to contact me directly. They can go to the Vito website. It has all my contact information. It has some details about the project. Yeah, I would love to hear from anyone who's interested.
Cool.
Yeah, similar here. I'm on social media. LinkedIn works if they want to contact me directly, or if they want to find my company, which is where they're more likely to find all of the experiment details and what we have going on, which is One Health Medical Technologies. So they should just be able to Google that. Our site should come up. The company's also on LinkedIn, and we post somewhat regularly, as well as Facebook as One Health Med Tech. And we have a bunch of our fun trail cam photos that have been posted semi-weekly in the last little bit, if people want to stay up to date on how things are going.
Awesome.
Well,
Jesse, you have anything else?
That's it for me. I think I'm good.
Cool.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that was really appreciate you guys taking the time in your evening away from the hockey game to come and talk about this. It was, like I said, very interesting for myself, and I know obviously the fishing and hunting community definitely intertwines quite a bit, so there'll be lots of listeners that are pretty interested in that. So really appreciate you taking the time, and who knows, maybe down the line, once more of the study has been complete and some findings, maybe come back on and kind of see what was learned throughout this whole study, and then Jesse can maybe share some pictures and stuff like that too.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Another one in the books, episode 95, Everything CWD with Scott Napper and Amanda Zimmerling. I hope everyone enjoyed that one as much as Jesse and myself did. I learned a ton. I'm sure Jesse already knew quite a bit more about CWD, but was there anything that really stood out to you in that episode?
Well, yeah, I definitely learned my fair share with talking to him. A lot of those questions or topics I had already asked Amanda out in the field, so I was kind of already rolling with that. But to have Scott there beside with the more like scientific or vaccine related side of things was super cool. And I think you made the comment, maybe we were just talking personally, on how he's a teacher and a good teacher at that point. And I think it was pretty early in our episode, he had made the comment talking about CWD and how it evolves, and he somehow dropped the point of Transformers, like the movie or like the TV show Transformers, transforming into from a race car to a dinosaur. And I just was amazed at that he could drop a simple reference like that to such a
Mhm.
complex, topic. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was cool. I think he did a great job, and Amanda as well. Very, uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Informative.
Informative and just like basic in the sense that an average Joe like me, you or I could understand it, and it was
The
it
weekend
was good.
warrior can understand
The
it.
weekend warrior can get it
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, no, I that was same here. The way things were explained, like you can use all the big science words and everything, and then I'm sure they always see people's eyes just kind of gloss over, like, but the way
Mhm.
they explain it, it was pretty sweet, and also cool, kind of seeing that the fact that they're advancing to a program like Amanda's for that study obviously shows that they've got something in the works and something coming down the pipeline, hopefully. So it's time to move on to the next step.
sure.
So that is exciting.
Sure.
I guess the biggest takeaway I had was how long it can stay in an environment for. That kind of that changes things big time. Like people talk about, oh, just take out the deer with CWD or whatever, like take them out of the population or let it take its course. Well, yeah, it's pretty hard to do when it can stay in an environment for that long. So definitely an eye opener. And then I guess hoping for the best to come from these studies. And it's pretty sweet that you get to be a part of it, especially if it does turn into some viable program that they're able to find from it. You can say you were a part of it. So I think that's pretty sweet as well.
Very exciting. Yeah. After talking with him, I think like the only viable option is a vaccine. So like that's probably was the most eye-opening or surprising thing that I learned, is that nature's is going to take care of itself, but not in the way that benefits us as hunters or just people that want to live off the land. We need to help. We need to help nature in this case. So
Yeah,
I
no,
think we
for
gotta get on
sure,
it.
for sure. So, yeah, if anyone has any questions about some of this stuff, obviously we've been in contact with Scott and Amanda. We could ask them and try and get some of that information back to you. I'm sure this did bring up quite a few questions, and if there was enough, could honestly probably do another episode about lots of those questions. But I think that'll pretty well wrap things up here. I think Jesse said people are coming back from night fishing, so the Starlink might get overloaded here once everyone wants to go check their phones after being on the water from 8 till 9 o'clock at night. So yeah, I think we'll wrap things up here. Big thanks as always to 13 Fishing for being the presenting sponsor of the podcast. Head over to the Rapala Canada website, use the code Weekend Warriors, place your order, save 15%, and it ships crazy quick. It'll be here in time for your next trip, most likely if you order it like a week before. So that's one part I really like about their program there. And you can never have enough tackle. Once you get bit by the bug, you can never have enough tackle. So just ask him at the lodge if you ever run into him. But yeah, that's all we got for episode 95 here, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.